The crazy thing about the power place though is like, first you go there and you think this is all just being made up in my mind. Like, there's no way this is real. Ooh, it's chilly. There's a snowstorm outside right now. What is happening? If anyone can tell me how to get the green juice so that it doesn't like bubble up so much at the top. I mean, I know first world problems. But I really am like, whatever. I still drink it. Still gets drunk. One of the first journeys that I was taught to go on was to go and find my power place. And essentially, you're supposed to start in the middle world. So you're supposed to start and you're supposed to envision basically a okay, so for me, what happened was I envisioned the cosmic tree, and it's just this big oak tree. I don't even know what an oak tree looks like. So let's not pretend. It was a tree. It was a tree that looked like a tree that you would see like in a Disney movie. Okay, like that kind of a tree. And basically you would go down through the root of the tree, as one does. And then for me, I go through a tunnel and then I landed in this place. And the first time I went there, it just felt really familiar to me. Like I'd been there before. And for me, it happened to be this kind of cave with an opening. Like it was a dark cave with an opening to a beach. I literally could draw this out for you. That's like how well I know this place. And that's kind of the place where you go, the very first journey that you might have, and you find your power place. And the whole point is just to get yourself familiar with this place. So for me, my power place is I will start at the cosmic tree and then I'll go down into a tunnel, and that's where I'll see, it feels very familiar. It's like the side of a beach and there is a cave and it kind of has an opening, and then inside the cave is my power place. Everyone's going to have a different one. Like you're going to have a different power place, not necessarily at all anything like mine. Your power place might be literally like your childhood bedroom that you imagine yourself going to, right? Or it might be like the inside of a bus. Like, okay. I don't know anyone whose power place is inside of a bus. But I'm just saying, like, there's no rules. Like, that's the beauty of all of this, is like there's no rules at all. But what's so crazy to me about the power place is, for those of you who might think like, this isn't real, I'm just like making this up in my head. It's almost like every time you go there, you gain a little bit more insight and a little bit more power. Simply by being there. It's like you get recharged. It feels very familiar. It feels like home. I'll tell you, every time I'm journeying and I land in my power place, I can feel like the sand beneath my feet, and I really feel like I'm home. And for someone, for those who know me, like I grew up basically as a third culture kid, and I spent a lot of my early years in the States, but then after that I moved around a lot. So I lived in Hong Kong for 3 years. I lived in Beijing for 3 years during high school, and had a very like international, what you would call like global experience. But it also meant that, like a lot of people who live a bit of a disjointed, childhood and teenage years, the idea of home became sort of more plastic for me. It was more malleable. It wasn't associated with a physical place. In fact, my childhood home, the one I grew up in till I was 12 years old, I've never been really back to. I've never stepped inside that home again. And so while I can see part of it, there might be like a little trauma associated with that. Like, feel like, especially, when you're like 13 and you're just dramatic, as I was, shocking, but you feel like I've been ripped away from my home. And so I think the idea of a home has always been so close to my heart, because then as you leave your physical home and you have to recreate these homes, and for whatever reason, my parents loved to like move around a lot. So we would like live in an apartment for a year and then we'd move. And so I think I counted, by the time that I was 18, I think I'd lived in like 15 different physical homes, right? And they were all wonderful, warm, loving homes, but the idea that, oh, this is the place that I grew up and I go back to, and here's my childhood bedroom and all of that, like, it doesn't exist for me. And so I think this idea of having a power place, which is really a metaphysical home, it's really a place that you can go to at any time. You know, you can access regardless of where you are physically in time and space, right? You can pause that and you can access that spiritual power place. I think is one of the reasons why I just love shamanism so much, because it's almost like home is with you. You know, I think for someone who has had to do a lot of work to like define one's own home, that's been really appealing. So the second reason is, once you get deeper into shamanism, there starts to be a blending between what I would call the spirit world and the ordinary world. So in the beginning, you really have to try hard, like you're actively sitting there, you know, like beating your drum and like trying to like get to this spiritual place. And you'll go on journeys, and there'll be guided journeys, and you'll be journeying with other people, and you'll have all of the kind of like accoutrements around you to get you to that place. Like, that's the whole point, right? But what's cool is that as you do it more, and I've probably been doing it for like a year now, right? So I'm still super early. But as you do it more, you require less of the things to get to where you want to go. So I've noticed that like during the day, if I'm just having a stressful situation, or if I'm even feeling lost, or if I just need a little bit of like anchoring and support, I can now call on my helping spirits. I can call on my guides. Like right now, I could be like, I could talk to them. I could be in conversation with them. And I found myself like just stop, like I'll be like in the middle of like a stressy zone, and I'll stop and I'll like close my eyes and be like, like, you know, I'll just like connect with spirit and like talk to my primary helping spirits. I'll call to them and they'll be right there, you know? And so I think what happens is, in the beginning, a lot of the structure around the different journeys you'll take is really to just warm up those muscles and create kind of like a muscle memory for you to be able to go on that journey. But as you'll find over time, it takes less effort to get there. So like even as I'm talking now, I could literally go into kind of a lucid dreaming trance-like state and go to my power place even as I'm like talking to this camera, which is like banana land, right? Like that's awesome and crazy. But I think that's like one of the other things that I really, really love about shamanism. So the third thing, and this is a little intangible, it's kind of hard to explain, but I'm going to call it surrendering to faith. And so I'm someone, if you can relate to this, love it. I'm someone who did not grow up with any kind of organized religion. My parents were just like, nope, like we're not into religion. We never went to church. We never did any of that stuff. So I never had a relationship with God. I didn't believe in God. I was like this bratty 12-year-old who was like, I'm an atheist and God doesn't exist. Like I thought I was so cool. And so this idea that one might have faith in something that's unseen, and sort of surrender into that, I think is definitely the path that I'm on now, where there's something very comforting about being like, I trust in my helping spirits, I trust in this path, I trust in the art and divinity of shamanism, like I trust in what's happening, what I'm seeing, what I'm learning, what I'm being led to do, and this is the key point, I'm not in control. Which for like a type A kind of high achiever is, it seems almost unfathomable that that would be the place where I might get the most comfort. In a place where, in fact, I surrender to the greater spirits and that I don't have control in this process. I can't like will something to happen through just like sheer intellect and working really hard. In fact, a lot of the magic and beauty that unfolds happens when you let go and when you kind of sit into a space where you're not in the driver's seat, knuckle gripping life so hard, you know? And so I think that element that's kind of been subtly introduced to me is one of my favorite things about shamanism. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is really the spiritual point of view of this practice. One of the things we're taught early on as shamanic practitioners is that when you are reading for someone, or when you are, going on a journey on someone's behalf, to keep in mind this idea of having a healing story. That there should be a sense of sort of optimism and grace and goodwill in the way that you see things. Meaning, if I journey on someone's behalf and I come back with all this information, I want to try and find what is healing about this. So one example is oftentimes when you journey about something, like, I don't know if I should quit my job or not, so I'm gonna go on this journey and see like what I should do. The helping spirits don't actually have a preference one way or the other. You know, they're like, oh, if you quit your job, you're going to learn a lot about scarcity, and that's going to be a very valuable lesson for you. So go for it. Right? They're not going to be like, oh, but like, what about your 401k? And, what about your health insurance? And they're just going to be like, this seems to be like a wonderfully great, difficult lesson that will be character building. And so, yes, the answer is yes. You should go forward and do this, right? Typically. And so I think oftentimes when we connect with spirit, there can be some ambiguity because they're not looking out. They're not trying to prevent certain tactical pain from happening. Like, yeah, you quit your job and then you like run out of money. Like they're not thinking about it like that. So I think part of the interpretation or part of the retelling of whatever you've seen is just having such utmost faith in the person that you are journeying for and telling that as a healing story, I think is important. And in like what goes hand in hand with that is the idea of the medicine council. And so one of the early journeys that you might go on is you would go to your power place and you would connect with a medicine council. And this council can be comprised of anyone or anything, any spirit, any animal, any god, goddess that comes forward. And so in this case, you might have different gods and goddesses and animals come forward, and these people are here to help you. And I think for someone who might be kind of cynical or just a little bit down on life, this idea that there's going to be this like whole council of helping spirits whose sole purpose is in this refraction of life, right? Like not their ultimate sole purpose, but in some variation of their purpose in relation to you going to your power place, that they're there to help, can be very disarming at first. Like, what do you mean I can go anytime to a place where there's like a wise council of people and they'll help me and they'll advise me and like the right person will step forward and I can be in conversation with that person? That goes really hand in hand with that healing story and really accepting that help, and accepting that vulnerability, I think is such a beautiful thing. Last thing I'm going to talk about is ancestors. Now, I was listening to a podcast once where someone was like, if someone doesn't have a relationship with their ancestors, I'm like, I don't even trust that person. Like, how can you not? And to be honest, I mean, I know a lot of friends who have been like, oh, I was really close to this aunt of mine or this grandfather of mine. And definitely, like, I have that experience too. I was very, very close with my paternal grandmother. When I was growing up, it almost felt like the feeling of her felt very much like a motherly figure to me. And we just were very close. Like, even my parents used to say, like, oh my gosh, like, you guys were just two peas in a pod. Like, grandma loved you so much and you loved grandma so much. And like, anytime you would see her, you'd just be so happy. And I used to go over there, and just anytime I'd like be in her physical space, like her apartment, I just would feel so comfortable and so loved and so at ease. And she passed a few, about more than 10 years back. And I took her passing very hard. It was like the first time that someone really close to me in my family had died. And I really just like found it had such like a physically constricting sensation, and like I guess it was grief. But I didn't know how to process it. You know, people don't really teach you how to process that. So, anywho, suffice to say, I always had a close relationship with her, but I never like used it. Like, I never tapped into it until this shamanism practice came into my life, where they were like, okay, you're gonna go, you know, one of the journeys is you're gonna go to your ancestral home and you're gonna meet your ancestors and you're gonna talk to them. And I have to say, like, it's so true, right? If you think about everything that your ancestors have been through, they've learned things, and they're there to look out for you, and they're there to really comfort you and give you guidance. Because a lot of the lessons that you're working through possibly are passed on from your ancestors, or are things that they had to suffer through or learn about. And so to not use that resource and to not tap into that and say, you know what, like, grandma, like, I am confused about what to do in this situation, and just to listen to that voice, I think is incredible. And even as I'm saying this, like, there is a big skeptical part of me that is like, what happens when people die? Are they gone? Is this just my imagination? Is this the same way that, like, you know, when you grow up, your parents' kind of strict voice becomes like the id in your ego, super ego, the super ego. You know what I mean? It becomes an internalized voice. And so I'm like, is this really her? Or is it like, and the truth is, well, maybe not. We won't know. Who cares? But again, going back to this idea of like kind of just surrendering to it and being like, yeah, I can live my life and be super analytical and just try to fight this. Or I could just lay down and see what happens. And if there is wisdom, or if there's a connection, you know, with a helping spirit who is an ancestor who has passed, like, I think that's amazing. And I believe it, you know. I think the one piece of like evidence that I can have or think of is like, the way I feel about my own children is just like such a love and protectiveness that I have to believe, like, even when I pass, that won't go away. Those are my 7 reasons, and I'm sure there's going to be 7,000 more as I continue on this journey. But cheers. I hope everyone's enjoying their own little green juice, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.